started with just this thing of thinking about collapsing stars and gold and outer space and spirits and the colour and it was a feeling. It's a very emotional thing, I think, where you start to kind of accumulate these things and then you start to give them a body. You try to sort of bring them into some kind of coalescence. Trying to find a way to reimagine gold rather than this kind of thing of commerce, to try and look at it again as a kind of a magical substance that comes from exploding stars, and it comes to Earth, and it doesn't, it's not something that's kind of, it's not native in a way to our Earth. Yeah. And so it has this kind of beautiful extraterrestrial possibility, a mythology of gold to commerce of gold and silver to a pantomime about gold. So that was like a starting point. And it comes out of my mother, who was a silversmith, a jeweller, looking at my mother's work and realising that a lot of the forms in her small work I had somehow quite unconsciously created or echoed in bigger sculptures, So, I started just looking at the materials that she worked with and then building up on that and just using it just as a very loose starting point and playing with that, and then feeling like I never have enough time to really research things in great depth, but not to let that get in the way, and just the freedom, I think, to play with it. I always think in the work I'm trying to find the shape of my own logic, or whether it, we have a shared shape of logic, or, often there's these patterns that come out, you think, is that what it really looks like, or is it sort of imposed logic? Or like I sort of work a lot with a kind of a material imagination. So, materials are the things that become quite evocative in a work. They're the things I try to articulate through things. So even though I can't afford real silver or gold, I just make a kind of a pantomime about it. Yeah. So, and the way people have objects around them in their houses, and especially when, people, they are magical things, like they just become sort of these carriers for so much that, we project into them, we load them up, and then, they're like when someone dies and everything becomes a holy relic, it can be like clearing out my mother's stuff, like her ashtrays and her cigarette butts became like holy relics. I got really upset if someone would empty the ashtray, because to someone else it's just junk, it's just rubbish or whatever, so I kind of like those shifting, the way objects are shifting. They're not these stable things, they're these quite fluid carriers of emotion or spirit or whatever you want to call it. Like I assemble all this stuff into the gallery for the duration of the show, and it, the more and more you work it comes in, it becomes something, it sort of coalesces into something, whether it's art or not, it's for the audience to decide, but at the end it goes away again, dissipates again, and then it's back into its, it's either it's trash or it's recycled, or it's, it ceases to be. It's just this temporary kind of psychic coalescence of stuff, matter. Alchemy and also chemistry, and the relationship between the two, that that you can flip from one to the other. But alchemy is like the sort of more magical form of. Well, it's not any more magical, but it's the other sort of side of chemistry. Science and maths and stuff is really magical as well, and the sort of material universe is extremely unbelievable, but
absolutely, physics and astronomy.
It's just as magical, but sometimes I think the naming in sort of alchemy, there's a sort of a different type of poetry. I mean, I have been looking at things to do with magic, and I was looking here in Dublin at there's a fantastic exhibition of Yeats on at the National Library, and discovering that he was into magic too, and that he'd made these beautiful little cards, these like tarot cards, and they were just these very simple abstract shapes that come from Enochian, a type of magic called Enochian magic. So I sort of found, so that's kind of what the painting comes out of, is a sort of a relationship to that, but it's my own. So it's not like I'm trying to get it to a point that the magic is absolutely real. Like there's no illusions, like I'm actually presenting something that is seriously magic. Like it's not, I'm not making this up. I'm trying to reveal it. I mean, I'm just trying to activate it and reveal it so that it can be seen. So that's why a lot of the exhibitions often have a real sort of physicality to them. And I really like to work with, directly in the space. And, there's a lot of things that go into conjuring up the end work. This is definitely the dream. This is what happens occasionally when you're lucky, that you get to come somewhere for 3 weeks at least and build an exhibition here. That's the way I like to do it, because instead of just sticking all your work in a box and sending it off and never meeting the people and never understanding really where the situation that it's set up in, and even though one white cube seems the same as another, it's not. There's always a very different context, that different people, different atmospheres. So other forms of gold that are in here are kind of whiskey. Whiskey is another kind of gold, the light coming through the whiskey. So there's kind of bottles of whiskey in there, and what else? And then there'll be some. Yeah, so I'm working on these costumes. I don't know if they're going to work yet. An imaginary perspective from the gold nuggets point of view, rather than. So they're sort of figurative, but they're like a pantomime costume. But it's like a cross-dressing thing between something seemingly inanimate and something human. So trying to get the human to cross-dress into something inanimate, like a gold nugget, a rock, a mineral. So the circle works, they kind of come out. They're a bit like a diary and a kind of a creation of a space that has both an interior and an exterior, and it has a threshold, so it builds up a threshold. And the circle is always something that's either superstitious or very formal, or quite, it's a very strict kind of formal holding pattern in a way, in its geometry. So it's almost like anything you can put, any object you want to put in this perimeter becomes sort of animated in this way through our own projection of our own kind of beliefs, superstitions, or scepticisms. That you kind of can't help but formulate them somehow in and around a circle. So for this one, I'm working with these kind of tall, skinny plinths that also have a dual kind of performative action, which is also to become a bit like a graph against the black stripes on the wall. And then there's going to be some balloons, but the combination is sort of an experiment. I'm just not quite sure how it all goes yet, because when I make a work, I have no idea. It kind of comes together in the space. So it's a sort of funny combination of modernism and witchcraft, I think. It's sort of